Long before the halls of TechCore Industries echoed with whispers of scandal, Maria Jenkins would quietly enter the gleaming glass building each evening as the sun set over Silicon Valley. At 45, her graceful movements and dignified bearing seemed at odds with the cleaning cart she pushed through the corporate corridors. The wedding ring she still wore, though her husband had passed away 5 years ago, caught the fluorescent lights as she worked, a reminder of the life she'd once known. Maria wasn't always a cleaning lady. Her journey began in a small apartment in Oakland, where she'd raised her daughter Tara while pursuing not one, but 2 master's degrees. Late nights of studying at Howard University had earned her impressive credentials in both business administration and computer science. Her previous job as a senior systems analyst at a Fortune 500 company had afforded them a comfortable life, private school for Tara, and dreams of starting her own tech consultancy someday. But life had other plans. The economic downturn hit like a tsunami, sweeping away jobs across Silicon Valley. Despite her impressive resume, months of interviews led nowhere. With Tara's college tuition looming and bills piling up, Maria made the difficult choice to take the night shift cleaning position at TechCore. Temporary, she told herself, just until something better comes along. Each night, as executives left their corner offices without so much as a glance in her direction, Maria absorbed everything. She noticed which departments stayed late, which managers treated their teams well, and most importantly, which filing cabinets contained the most interesting documents. Her analytical mind never stopped working, even as her hands moved methodically through the motions of cleaning. The other cleaning staff nicknamed her the Professor because she'd often helped them with their children's homework during breaks, explaining complex math problems or reviewing English essays. But to the daytime employees, she was invisible, just another shadow moving through the building after hours. Brandon Thompson, the CEO, would occasionally stay late, his custom Italian shoes propped up on his mahogany desk as he barked orders into his phone. He never bothered to learn Maria's name, simply referring to her as the cleaning lady on the rare occasions he acknowledged her presence. His arrogance was legendary among the night staff, but Maria met his dismissive attitude with unwavering professionalism. What no one knew was that every night, after finishing her shift at 3 a.m., Maria would return to her modest apartment and spend 2 hours studying TechCore's public financial reports. She'd invested wisely over the years, carefully building a portfolio that would have surprised anyone who bothered to look beyond her cleaning uniform. The severance package from her previous job hadn't gone into a savings account. It had gone straight into TechCore's IPO, a decision that would prove more significant than anyone could have imagined. Between shifts, she took online courses in the latest cybersecurity protocols and blockchain technology, keeping her skills razor-sharp. Her daughter Tara, now a pre-law student, would often find her mother asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by technical manuals and investment reports. "Mom," Tara would say, "you don't have to keep doing this. We can figure something else out." But Maria knew better. She saw something in TechCore's operations that others missed, patterns in the company's behavior that raised red flags to her trained eye. She just needed time, patience, and access. 3 things her position as a cleaning lady surprisingly provided in abundance. As she pushed her cart through the executive floor that fateful night, Maria had no way of knowing that she was about to stumble upon information that would change everything. The random piece of paper peeking out of Brandon Thompson's shredder bin would set in motion a chain of events that would rock Silicon Valley to its core and transform the invisible cleaning lady into the most talked-about figure in the tech industry. It started with a simple piece of paper, carelessly tossed and missing the shredder bin in Brandon Thompson's office. Most cleaning staff would have simply picked it up and completed its journey to destruction. But Maria's eyes caught a familiar programming term that made her pause. Her hands trembled slightly as she retrieved the document, her 2 decades of tech experience screaming that something wasn't right. The office was silent at 1 a.m., with only the distant hum of vacuum cleaners and the soft glow of her cleaning cart's mounted flashlight. Maria smoothed out the crumpled paper and what she read made her blood run cold. It was an internal memo detailing TechCore's secret data harvesting program, codenamed Project Goldmine. The company wasn't just collecting basic user data, they were secretly accessing private medical records, banking information, and even children's school records through their widely used educational software. Maria didn't just clean the offices, she cleaned the server rooms too. She'd noticed the new servers being installed late at night, their mysterious purpose now becoming clear. The company was storing massive amounts of illegal data, selling it to the highest bidders on the dark web. Her mind raced to the millions of families using TechCore's safe and secure products, unaware their most private information was being exploited. Over the next few nights, Maria began paying special attention to the documents in executive trash bins. She discovered more pieces of the puzzle: emails discussing offshore accounts, memos about bribing privacy auditors, and charts showing the massive profits from their illegal data trade. She used her phone to carefully photograph each piece of evidence, creating a secure encrypted folder that grew larger each night. The real breakthrough came when she was cleaning the conference room after a late-night executive meeting. In their haste to leave, someone had forgotten to erase the whiteboard. The complex flowchart drawn there matched perfectly with the illegal data architecture she'd been uncovering. Maria's technical background allowed her to understand exactly how they were pulling it off, and more importantly, how to prove it. One night, while checking the executive bathroom supplies, she overheard Brandon Thompson in his office, arguing with someone on speakerphone. "Nobody's going to find out," he had sneered. "Who's going to believe a cleaning lady anyway? These people are invisible." The words stung, but they also strengthened her resolve. Maria started staying an extra hour after her shift, using her access to the empty building to gather more evidence. She discovered that TechCore's popular educational apps were secretly recording children's conversations through device microphones. Their banking security software, trusted by millions, had a hidden backdoor that collected users' financial data. The company's medical records system, used by hundreds of hospitals, was selling patient information to insurance companies. The weight of her discovery kept her awake during the days when she should have been sleeping. She thought about her daughter Tara, who used to play educational games on her tablet. How many other parents were unknowingly exposing their children to this massive privacy breach? After 3 weeks of gathering evidence, Maria knew she had to act. She carefully organized everything she'd found, creating detailed documentation that even a non-technical person could understand. Her years of business experience helped her recognize that this wasn't just a technical issue. It was a massive corporate fraud that could ruin millions of lives. Taking a deep breath, she decided to present her findings at the next morning's executive meeting. Surely, once they saw the evidence, they would have to take action. Despite Brandon Thompson's arrogance, surely the other executives would understand the severity of the situation. Maria had no way of knowing that her attempt to do the right thing was about to subject her to the most humiliating experience of her professional life, and set in motion events that would change everything. The morning sun streamed through TechCore's floor-to-ceiling windows as Maria, still in her cleaning uniform, waited outside the executive conference room. Her heart pounded against her chest, but her face remained calm. She'd spent all night preparing her presentation, organizing the evidence into a clear, compelling case that even non-technical executives could understand. The executive team filed in for their 8 a.m. meeting, expensive suits and coffee cups in hand. Some did double takes seeing the cleaning lady waiting there, while others simply looked through her as if she were invisible. Maria took a deep breath and followed them in, clutching her folder of evidence like a shield. Brandon Thompson sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. When Maria cleared her throat to speak, he looked up with irritation. "The trash bins can wait until after our meeting," he said dismissively, causing a few chuckles around the table. "Sir," Maria began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I need to bring something urgent to your attention. It's about Project Goldmine and the illegal data collection." The word illegal made Brandon's head snap up. His face darkened as Maria began laying out her evidence, explaining the technical details of the data theft she'd uncovered. She'd barely gotten through her first point when the laughter started. It began as snickers, then grew into full-blown laughter. "Look at this," Brandon interrupted, standing up with a theatrical flourish. "Our cleaning lady thinks she's a cybersecurity expert." The room erupted in cruel laughter. Maria stood her ground, trying to continue. "The evidence shows clearly that private medical records are being—" "Honey," a female executive cut in, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Maybe you should stick to knowing the difference between Windex and Pine Sol." Brandon walked around the table, his expensive shoes clicking on the polished floor. He towered over Maria, his face a mask of contemptuous amusement. "Let me make this very clear," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "You're here to clean toilets. That's all you're good for. That's all you'll ever be good for. Now get out before I have security escort you out." The room fell silent, watching. Maria felt her cheeks burn, but she held her head high. 20 pairs of eyes followed her as she walked toward the door, some amused, some uncomfortable, none supportive. As she reached for the handle, Brandon called out, "And by the way, you're fired. We can't have cleaning staff who think they're too good for their job." The security guard was already waiting outside, summoned by a quick text from Brandon. He roughly grabbed her evidence folder, papers spilling onto the floor as executives watched through the glass walls, some still chuckling. As she was escorted out, she heard Brandon's voice boom from the conference room. "Now, where were we before the help tried to play detective?" In the lobby, Maria's building access card was confiscated. The same security guard who had greeted her warmly every night for months now treated her like a criminal, watching suspiciously as she gathered her few belongings from the janitor's closet. Walking to her car in the early morning light, Maria's hands shook as she fumbled with her keys. But as she sat in the driver's seat, something unexpected happened. Instead of tears, she felt a strange calm settle over her. They thought they'd seen the last of her. They thought they'd put her in her place. What they didn't know was that Maria Jenkins had faced worse obstacles in her life and emerged stronger. They didn't know about her degrees, her investments, or her strategic mind. Most importantly, they didn't know that in their arrogance, they'd just made the biggest mistake of their careers. As she drove home, Maria wasn't planning revenge. She was planning justice, and she knew exactly how to get it. The morning after her humiliation, Maria sat at her small kitchen table, her laptop open, and a determined look in her eyes. Her daughter Tara found her there, still in her cleaning uniform, typing furiously. "Mom, I heard what happened," Tara said, putting a comforting hand on her mother's shoulder. "We should sue them for wrongful termination." Maria smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she knew something others didn't. "No, baby, we're going to do something much bigger. They think they destroyed me, but they just gave me exactly what I needed: time." Over the next 3 months, Maria transformed her small apartment into a command center. The dining room wall became covered with sticky notes and flowcharts mapping out TechCore's illegal operations. She'd managed to save copies of key documents despite the security guard's rough handling of her evidence folder, and now she was building an even stronger case. During the day, while others thought she was probably looking for another cleaning job, Maria was taking advanced cybersecurity courses online. She cashed in some of her smaller investments to pay for specialized training in corporate fraud detection. Her background in computer science made her a quick study, and soon she was better equipped than most federal investigators to understand the depth of TechCore's crimes. She reached out to former colleagues from her days as a systems analyst, carefully building a network of allies without revealing her full plan. One friend, now working at the SEC, helped her understand exactly what evidence would be most damaging. Another, a privacy rights attorney, secretly advised her on how to protect herself legally while gathering information. Late at night, when Tara was asleep, Maria would often sit by her window, Looking out at the city lights, she thought about all the other cleaning staff at TechCore, how they were treated as invisible, just as she had been. She thought about the millions of users whose private data was being sold without their knowledge. Each memory of Brandon Thompson's mocking laughter only fueled her determination. What the TechCore executives never bothered to discover was that Maria had been investing in their company since its early days. She'd recognized its potential during the IPO and had steadily bought shares whenever the price dipped. Through careful management and smart diversification through various investment vehicles, she'd accumulated a significant ownership stake. Now she was about to use that position in a way they never saw coming. She hired a discreet financial advisor who helped her consolidate her investments and maximize her voting power as a shareholder. She studied corporate bylaws late into the night, understanding exactly how much support she would need at the shareholders' meeting to force changes. Maria also began anonymously feeding carefully selected pieces of information to key tech journalists, building public awareness of privacy concerns around TechCore's products without revealing the full scope of their illegal activities. She watched as small articles began appearing in tech blogs, raising questions about the company's data practices. Each move was calculated, each step carefully planned. She took detailed notes of every conversation she'd overheard during her time as a cleaning lady, mapping out the relationships and politics among the executive team. She knew who was loyal to Brandon Thompson and who might be willing to turn against him when the moment came. As the annual shareholders' meeting approached, Maria prepared herself for the confrontation to come. She got her power suits out of storage, had them carefully pressed. She practiced her presentation in front of Tara, refining every word until it was perfect. "Are you nervous?" Tara asked the night before the big meeting. Maria thought about Brandon Thompson's sneering face, about all the people who had laughed at her. "No," she replied, a quiet confidence in her voice. "I'm ready to show them exactly who they underestimated." The next morning would bring the moment of truth, and Maria Jenkins was prepared to shake Silicon Valley to its core. The story of how Maria Jenkins became one of TechCore's largest shareholders began long before she ever pushed a cleaning cart through its halls. 7 years earlier, when the company was preparing for its initial public offering, Maria had just received a substantial severance package from her previous employer. While others saw it as a setback, she saw an opportunity. She remembered sitting in her kitchen, calculator in hand, explaining to her daughter why she was about to invest every penny of her severance. "Sometimes, Tara," she'd said, "you have to risk everything to gain everything." She'd studied TechCore's business model, recognized its potential, and made the bold move that would later change everything. Through the years, Maria had lived modestly, well below her means. When friends questioned why she kept her small apartment, she'd smile and say she was saving for Tara's future. What she didn't tell them was that every spare dollar was going into carefully planned stock purchases. Each time TechCore's stock price dipped, she bought more shares. Through different investment vehicles and trading accounts, she slowly built her position without drawing attention. Market downturns that scared other investors away only made her more determined. She'd worked multiple jobs. The cleaning position at TechCore was just one of them, to keep funding her investment strategy. While executives drove luxury cars and boasted about their bonuses, Maria quietly accumulated more voting power than any of them suspected existed outside their boardroom. Her financial advisor, James Chen, had initially thought she was crazy. "You're putting too many eggs in one basket," he'd warned. But as her stake grew, his skepticism turned to admiration. Together, they'd structured her investments through various holdings and shell companies, making it difficult for anyone to trace the true ownership back to her. The day Maria calculated that she owned 17% of TechCore's shares, she celebrated by buying herself a single cup of expensive coffee, her first luxury purchase in years. That same morning, she'd overheard Brandon Thompson complaining about having to answer to shareholders who owned measly 1 or 2% stakes. If he'd known that the cleaning lady who emptied his trash owned 8 times that amount, he might have treated her differently. Maria used her position as a cleaner to gather intelligence that helped her investment decisions. She knew when new products were about to launch, when deals were being made, when executives were nervous. Every bit of information helped her time her stock purchases perfectly. The same invisibility that the executives mocked became her greatest asset. She kept detailed records of every transaction, every share purchase, every dividend reinvestment. Her daughter would often find her late at night, surrounded by financial statements and SEC filings, making sure every detail was perfect. "Mom," Tara would say, "you're like a secret agent." In the weeks leading up to the shareholders' meeting, Maria worked with her legal team to verify and document her ownership stake. They were amazed at her foresight and attention to detail. Every share was properly registered, every voting right secure. She had more than enough power to demand changes in the company's leadership. The night before the shareholders' meeting, Maria stood in front of her mirror, wearing one of her newly pressed power suits. Gone was any trace of the cleaning lady they had mocked. In her place stood a majority shareholder who had earned every share through intelligence, patience, and determination. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Everything's ready for tomorrow. They won't know what hit them." Maria smiled at her reflection. Tomorrow, Brandon Thompson and his executive team would learn a powerful lesson about judging people by their appearances. But more importantly, they would learn that karma has a way of coming back around, sometimes wearing a power suit instead of a cleaning uniform. As she laid out her documents for the next day, Maria thought about how fitting it was that the very company that had humiliated her would become the instrument of her greatest triumph. The morning of the annual shareholders' meeting dawned bright and clear. Maria arrived at TechCore's headquarters an hour early, this time walking through the front doors in a crisp navy suit instead of slipping in through the service entrance. The security guard who had escorted her out 3 months ago did a double take, checking and rechecking her shareholder credentials. The grand conference room on the top floor was filling up with shareholders, board members, and executives. Brandon Thompson sat at the head table, looking confident and relaxed, occasionally checking his phone with a bored expression. He didn't even glance up when Maria entered the room and took her seat in the front row. The meeting began with the usual formalities: financial reports, voting procedures, and executive summaries. Brandon delivered a glowing speech about the company's record profits, conveniently leaving out any mention of how those profits were achieved. Maria sat quietly, watching other shareholders nod along, completely unaware of what was about to happen. When the floor opened for shareholder questions, Maria stood up. The microphone felt cool in her hand as she began to speak. "Mr. Thompson," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the now silent room, "I believe you remember me." Brandon's face showed a flicker of confusion before recognition set in. His smug smile faltered as Maria continued, "3 months ago, you told me to stick to cleaning toilets. Today, I'm here as the owner of 17% of this company's shares." The room erupted in murmurs. Board members leaned forward in their chairs. Brandon's face had gone pale. Maria's financial advisor, James, began distributing detailed packets to the board members, evidence of both her ownership stake and the company's illegal activities. "What you're looking at," Maria explained, her voice steady, "is proof of systematic privacy violations, illegal data collection, and corporate fraud. As a major shareholder, I move for an immediate vote to remove the current executive team." Brandon jumped to his feet. "This is ridiculous. She's just a cleaning lady." The words hung in the air, making several board members wince. Maria smiled slightly. He was only proving her point about the company's toxic leadership. She proceeded to lay out her case, using her technical background to explain the complex data theft in terms everyone could understand. She showed how children's private information was being sold, how medical records were being compromised, how customer trust was being violated for profit. The board members' faces grew increasingly grave as they flipped through the evidence. One of them, an elderly woman, removed her glasses and stared hard at Brandon. "Is this true?" she demanded. Brandon's stammered denials only made him look more guilty. A younger board member, known for his ethical investing stance, stood up. "I move to second the motion for an immediate vote." The room crackled with tension as other shareholders began to voice their support. Brandon made a desperate attempt to adjourn the meeting, but Maria was prepared. She cited company bylaws that allowed for emergency voting sessions when serious misconduct was alleged. Her legal team, sitting quietly in the back, nodded approvingly. The vote was conducted by paper ballot to ensure privacy. As they were being counted, Brandon sat slumped in his chair, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperate fear. Other executives whispered frantically among themselves, some already placing calls to their lawyers. When the head of the board stood to announce the results, the room fell silent. The vote was overwhelming. Brandon Thompson and his executive team were to be removed immediately. But there was more. The board had also voted to appoint an interim CEO to guide the company through this crisis. As Maria stood to accept the position, she caught sight of her reflection in the window. Behind her, Brandon was being asked to leave the building, escorted by the same security team that had once thrown her out. The cleaning lady hadn't just cleaned house, she had taken it over, and she was about to show everyone exactly how a company should be run. The first changes Maria made as CEO were felt within hours of her appointment. She walked through the same halls she had once cleaned, but this time, employees scrambled to attention as she passed. Her first stop was the janitor's break room, where her former colleagues stared in disbelief as she entered. "Starting today," she announced, "every cleaning staff member gets full benefits, educational opportunities, and a significant raise." The tears and hugs that followed made the morning's victory even sweeter. She knew what it meant to be invisible, and in her company, no one would feel that way again. By the end of her first week, Maria had turned TechCore upside down. Her technical background proved invaluable as she worked with engineers to dismantle the illegal data collection systems. She personally called major clients to explain the changes, earning their trust with her honesty and dedication to fixing the problems. The media couldn't get enough of her story. From cleaning lady to CEO, the woman who cleaned up Silicon Valley ran as a headline in major newspapers. But Maria wasn't interested in fame. She was focused on transformation. When reporters asked about her incredible rise, she simply said, "Success isn't about where you start. It's about never letting others define your worth." Brandon Thompson and his executive team didn't fade quietly into the background. They tried to fight back with lawyers and threats, but Maria had everything documented. When they realized the extent of her evidence, they quickly agreed to settlements that included silence agreements. The last time Maria saw Brandon, he was cleaning out his office, looking smaller somehow without his expensive suit and arrogant smile. 1 month into her role, Maria introduced a company-wide mentorship program, specifically designed to help employees at all levels advance their careers. She remembered all the nights she'd spent studying while others slept, and she wanted to make that path easier for others. The changes she implemented went far beyond just fixing the illegal practices. She established an ethical aid department, created transparent data policies, and set up a foundation to help underprivileged students pursue careers in technology. Under her leadership, TechCore's stock price soared as customers and investors responded to the company's new direction. Tara, now finishing law school, often visited her mother's new office, the same one where Brandon Thompson had once mocked her mother. "You know what's funny, Mom?" she said one evening. "They thought they were putting you in your place when they fired you. They just didn't realize that place was their boss." The sweetest moment came 6 months into her tenure, when Maria received an email from a young janitor at another tech company. The woman wrote about how Maria's story had inspired her to enroll in coding classes while continuing to clean offices at night. Maria immediately offered her an internship at TechCore. 1 year after the shareholders' meeting that changed everything, Maria stood on stage at a major tech conference, delivering a keynote speech about ethical leadership and the importance of recognizing talent in unexpected places. In the front row sat her former cleaning staff colleagues, all of whom had been given opportunities to advance within the company based on their interests and abilities. Success, she told the packed auditorium, is the best revenge. But true victory isn't about getting even. It's about making sure nobody else has to face the discrimination and humiliation you once faced. As she looked out over the audience, Maria thought about that morning when she'd been laughed out of the executive meeting. The memory no longer stung. Instead, it reminded her of an important truth. Sometimes the people others look down on are actually looking down on them from a position they haven't reached yet. Under the bright stage lights, Maria Jenkins smiled, knowing that somewhere out there, another underestimated person was quietly planning their own rise to the top. And when they made it, she would be the first to applaud.